It's just me and Mike this week. We made it a little more flowy than normal, a little more of a conversation. We talk about competitors. We talk about U.S. manufacturing. Thank you, Northbeam. Thank you, Sendlane. Thank you, Fulfill. My life would be worse without you three. So thank you for being here and supporting us through this BFCM, Black Friday Bonanza, and December peak holiday. So thank you, guys. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.
Sean, have you come off of the Cyber Monday high yet?
You know, it's such a stressful week. And there's like at a certain point, we should talk about this, that like the higher up you get in an organization that gets bigger, you actually become more helpless. It's like, what am I going to do on a Cyber Monday
That's right.
or Black Friday?
It's like the Titanic. It's like, I can't turn this ship significantly in 24 or 48 hours. I just, it's baked.
Yeah, a lot of it is like, you're just waiting for the season to roll in. It's like, how much is it going to snow, right? But yeah, I mean, so I would say that, stress levels were pretty high, but like, I definitely didn't feel euphoric at any point. It's still just kind of continuing the business. The thing is, I have to really start planning Q1. I'm like behind planning Q1. So I don't even get to enjoy December or even November at all. But how about you, Mike? I mean, you're a day late in reporting. So are you just got Cyber Monday results in probably?
Yeah, we just officially did. And we had a couple of Black Friday and Cyber Monday were over $1 million days on Amazon for us, that was exciting to see. But what's funny? This happens to me every year. Every year you see the number spike and you think, I know January is supposed to be a lot slower, but maybe this year it won't be. And it's like you lie to yourself. You're like, maybe this is the year that we'll just go on, and then it's like, the cold, hard truth of seasonality just punches you right in the face at the end of December. And so I try to manage my emotions and not get too high, because then it's always like a pretty hard hangover when you're in the dog days of January.
Yeah, dude. A dirty trick I always see brands do is they'll be like, yeah, we have a $50 million run rate. And it's like, that just means you did $4 million in December. It's like,
you can't extrapolate out the 4 days of Black Friday to Cyber Monday for an entire year. Sorry, guys, that doesn't work.
It'd be like, oh, I'm $1 billion brand if I just take this one day. And yeah, it doesn't work like that. No, well, on the point of January is always going to be smaller. That's why I think some brands, if they're super young, they look at month over month growth. I'm like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's software metrics. Like January is always going to be smaller. Another fact is that demand is never pulled up. Every year, my team around like November 20th is like, what if we pulled demand up this year? Like we had a big October, we had a big September. Never happened. I'm going on 10 years of e-commerce. Demand has never been pulled up. We're the week after Black Friday, still big.
It's such a good point. So this year, I guess we've talked a little bit about this, but this year we're like, we're going to go early. We're going to go early with Black Friday. Last year, some people did it. And, I as kind of one of the old guard in e-commerce, I was just kind of like, this is stupid. I'm not going to do it. It's desperate. And then at some point this year, I just started saying like, well, maybe there's something to this for the exact reason you're saying. It's like basically the only reason to not go early in November is if you think, hey, we're just pulling demand forward, which does happen at times. Like I think Prime Day is a good example where Prime Day certainly displaces some volume for Amazon in like the week after. But so we went early, and Sean, I can't see any evidence that we pulled any demand forward. It's like, it's just literally we unlocked, whatever, a couple $1 million worth of demand that we didn't know was there.
Yeah. And I agree that there's certain times in the year you can pull demand forward. Prime Day is a great example. Our biggest Amazon day, except for Black Friday and Cyber Monday ever, was this July Prime Day. Mm-hmm. And you're right that like the next week or 2 weeks, it's difficult to get those Amazon sales in, right? They're definitely below average. But as a brand becomes bigger, as a brand becomes more global, and as the rest of the industry just starts opening up discounts in October, basically, I've just never seen demand actually get pulled forward. It's a different shopper, it's an earlier shopper, and demand is still there all holiday. A thing is, if you ever go to Europe in November, they have Christmas decorations up because they do not have a thing called Thanksgiving, right? So
Right.
their Christmas window is 60 days or 90 days in the Nordic countries. So I think people are used to long shopping windows, and I've just never seen demand get pulled forward. So
It's interesting on the creative that worked for us, though, and I'm curious if you saw the same thing. Creative that worked for us this year was centered around talking about our discounting and the sale that we were running, and a lot of the gifting, personalized stuff that we ran that works during other periods and probably will kill it in December didn't didn't do as great during the period. And it makes me even wonder how much of the buying that people are doing Black Friday through Cyber Monday is even gifting buying, or if it's more, sale driven buying for themselves.
dude, I think that is a good observation that the Black Friday shopper tends to not be a gift giver. It depends on who your demographic is. Like if you're selling to men, the gift giver shopper is going to walk into Target on December 23rd.
That's exactly
Like,
right. That's exactly right. They're not thinking ahead at all.
all right, going back to the point of this episode, we just wanted to give a little more context into two important ideas we've been talking about. So, Mike tweeted something, it'll be on the screen right here, that it's way better to be in an industry with competitors. And you and I share the same opinion, but we should really expand on this. We both talked about it slightly, but can you talk and explain why a competitor is the best thing that can happen to your brand?
Yeah. So think about it to use an analogy here. Let's think about it like birds. Birds fly in V's, and the reason that they fly in V's that we learned when we were a kid is because that allows for one bird to be kind of the lead bird and to do the hardest work, and other birds to kind of draft off that. But then they trade, right? Like one bird goes from the back of the V to the front of the V and does the heavy lifting for a while, and then because they're trading in and out, the entire kind of flock or whatever you call a V of birds, they're able to go faster and to do more. And the theory that I have is that this is exactly how categories work. That if you have a category where there's just one really good brand, that yes, that brand is going to get a lot of the market share, but it's going to be hard for that category to be as strong as it can be if it has 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 really strong brands. One, just like quantitatively, think about it like this. If you have 7 brands in drinkware or 10 brands in drinkware that are producing good products and are spending money on marketing, you're going to have exponentially more awareness and more innovation that's happening than if you have one incumbent that's rarely challenged. You think about the industries that stagnate and that ultimately are the best candidates for disruption. It's usually industries where there isn't competition and where there aren't strong competitors that are pushing the lead dog. And so the point of my post was basically this, that we had our best year ever. And I know for a fact that not everybody in our industry had their best year ever, but several other players in our industry had their best year ever and had banner years. And that, historically the thinking is a scarcity mindset. It's a zero sum red ocean kind of mindset that if one of your competitors does really well, that you're losing, they're winning at your expense. And so competition is about you making sure you win and your competitors lose. The model I'm kind of advocating for is in the best world, you have really good competitors that do really good things. And there's a rising tide that lifts all the boats because there's more dollars and more customers and more attention that are pouring into your industry. And as a result, every single strong player has a business that's growing and thriving. Maybe that can't happen in every industry. Like, I think the thing that makes drinkware an industry where this can definitely happen is that people don't just own one, they buy multiples, and they really buy multiples per year. So as a result, some other good examples of this would be like food categories where there's 5 or 6 or 7 brands that make, really good tortilla chips. There's room for a bunch of good tortilla chip companies. There's room for a bunch of good energy bar companies. There's room for a bunch of good whey protein companies. And that's the general argument. When I talk to entrepreneurship students, all the time, and they're telling me their startup ideas. Usually what you hear is this kind of fear of competition. Like, I've got to come up with this totally unique idea that nobody's ever had before, because then I won't have to deal with competition. And what I always communicate is, well, listen, if there's no competition, either A, it's a terrible idea and there's the reason why nobody's doing it, or B, you're going to have to carry all the water. And that's really difficult to do, to establish like this category is something consumers want to spend money on. So, anyway, I wrote this big tweet that was basically just a thank you note to all of our competitors, because I think we did some special things this year. I think we helped grow the category. But listen, like, Stanley helped grow the category a ton, and we were a massive beneficiary. And Owala helped grow the category a ton, and we were a massive beneficiary. And Yeti has grown the category a ton, and we've been a massive beneficiary. And so I'm a fan of our competitors. That's the ironic statement.
I'm just so not stressed about ops right now. And we're totally balancing the load using Fulfill in pretty real time. So we saw what was going on with orders, and we're like, oh shoot, like our guys in Tennessee, they're going to be overloaded. They're just going to be overloaded. We got to shift. Like, we just started moving states in Fulfill, moving it around, and boom, no problem at all. Like, it was no way we could have done this last year. I mean, it would have like put a bullet in my head if this would have happened. It's amazing how easy it was, because we put in the work with Fulfill. We organized everything properly. And like, I got an email from Sharon a couple of days ago, just like, hey, I know it's BFCM. If you need anything, call me. like what Sean said, not want to deal with, like, not hiring any company, any vendor, unless you talk to the CEO. Like, that was, we didn't need to talk to him because their team and our team did such a great job prepping for this. But we're going to do 150,000 orders in this month. Obviously, that's not a huge number for certain types of brands, but for us, it's a lot, and big boxes. And we just, we got to be really on our game. And without Fulfill, there's no way I would be with a smile on my face today.
No, and you're totally right. So there's a human instinct to move towards monopolistic behavior, and consumer cannot support monopolistic behavior. Industries that can support monopolies are service-based industries, right? Or regulatory moat industries. So why is Google a monopoly? Well, it's a service, and the service is free and it's good. Why would there be another one? It's literally free, right? Uber, it's so hard to build an Uber. You need riders and you need drivers and you need a marketplace and you need permanent coverage everywhere. So that tends to become a monopoly. You don't want 100 Ubers. Like, maybe the federal government does, right? But from a user experience, actually the monopoly or a duopoly or something close to that gives you what you actually want. Consumer, there can never be a monopoly, right? Like, you brought up food brands. The reason why Coke and Pepsi can be duopolies is they challenge themselves all the time, right? Like, do you want Coke or do you want Diet Coke, or do you want their Sprite offering, or do you want their Fanta offering? Like, they own this entire book of business to disrupt themselves. And that's what General Mills does and all these food brands, right? But that doesn't happen in durable goods that often, right? At the end of the day, consumer taste is specific and it changes and it's different. So there needs to be somebody at a $10 price point, $20, $40, $50. There needs to be something for the young girl versus the older dude. And you see those develop naturally over markets. So it is totally wrong to think a consumer business will ever have monopolistic power. And that's what Allbirds raises money at, or that's what any consumer brand, like Away, like they're gonna take over the carry-on market. The carry-on market's $10 billion. They got 400 million of it. That's about as good as you can hope for, right? So let's talk about your competitors real quick, right?
Sure.
And just to give people the scale of the business. So Yeti will do 600 million plus in drinkware this year. So they're doing a ton of money. Stanley, private, we don't have any of the numbers. They'll probably do, you think, 200 million in drinkware?
I have heard 800 million. for this year.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That is a lot.
Yeah.
That is a
Like,
lot of
and that's what
drinkware.
I'm saying. Like when you talk about the growth, the numbers that we've seen are that that in housewares, portable beverage ware is basically the one place where there's growth. And it's interesting, kind of a couple of things are going on in my particular industry. Two things. One is the ASP, the average selling price, is going up, and the unit volume's going up. They're both going up. A lot of times you'll see growth and it'll be like, well, people are just charging more, but in this case, they're both rising at the same time. And the other interesting thing that's gone on in our industry is that there's this commodity layer that, think the Walmarts of the world that have their own like home goods, like, the inexpensive white label type stuff. And the commodity layer has not appreciated at all. It stayed exactly the same, but the brand layer, like the national brand layer, has gone bananas. So not only is the category growing a lot, like 17, 20%, it's a big number. But then if you subdivide it between national brands and everything else, the national brands are probably growing at like 40 or 50%. It's just some kind of crazy number. And so, yeah, so Stanley's really big. I don't know if they're bigger than Yeti, but they're really big. Yeti's really big. And then their Hydro Flask is really big. I think, I don't know what their growth, I think they may have had a negative growth year, but like they're huge. They're kind of the crown jewel in the Helen of Troy portfolio.
Yeah, and Hydro Flask, public. You can look at their numbers. I'm going to guess, 500 million plus or whatever. So we named 3 brands and we get to $2 billion in volume. And that's what Mike's talking about. The best thing for him is like these other people are spending money growing the category, and like you're showing up in Target, Walmart, your own website. You're showing up on Amazon as a top search. Like there's the behavior aspect that not everyone wants a Yeti. If you look at a guy with a beard, he won't buy a Stanley. He's like, that's for girls on TikTok, right? And some people might not want Stanley. Some people might not want the hype nature of it, that like there's drops and they sell out or whatever. They don't have the right ornamentation, the price point, whatever. Like there's always going to be consumer, taste that changes up and makes it so you have to have a competitor. The next thing is just the way digital ads work. If Yeti spends money on water bottle ads, it pushes people in market on Facebook into water bottles, and then maybe they convert on a Simple Modern one. So it
normalizes the behavior of spending a lot of money on water bottles. Like I think the more that you see it on TikTok and the more you see on ads, Sean, that what's happened is it's just become like, oh yeah, owning 10 of these, owning 20 of these, like of course, right? Whereas like 3 or 4 years ago, that would have been like a weird idea. Like why would you have 10 water bottles, But today it's not, partially because of what you're saying.
Yeah. So there's a natural urge to be like, I need to keep all the resources for myself. But if you're in consumer, competitors, you also said something that is actually more ultralistic, is that they're pushing innovation forward. You're totally right. If there's no innovation in a space, like it gets worse for consumers over time. You have to have a different or better offering than your competitors, and that makes you put money into R&D. It makes you build a factory in the United States. It makes you do all these cool things. So
and it makes it harder. It makes it harder to market. Like what makes something easy to market? You're one of the best marketers I know. What makes something easy to market is new, fresh, interesting. And so if you don't have competitors pushing you, if there's not innovation, then like what's the new thing you're talking about? It's funny. I was talking to Connor, your CMO, and he was saying for years you guys had so little in the new bucket, right? It was like, we're marketing the exact same thing and we've got like, 2 ornamentations and we're just doing the same thing over and over again. And then when you guys started having new features and new ornamentations, like the NFL drop, you're just crushing it because you learned how to sell the Ridge wallet without new. But then when you have the extra kind of juice that comes from being able to say, hey, you like Ridge wallet? Well, look at this new thing. Look at the cool shiny thing. It's just so much easier to market, right?
Dude, yeah. We talk about we spent 5 years playing basketball with ankle weights on and we just removed them. So like we're just dunking every single chance we get.
I love that.
Talking about Yeah. Talking about competitors, right? We launched a carry-on. We're building a travel line, another really competitive category. And why are we doing it? Why do we think we can stand out? And it's that Away and Monos and any other travel brand, they're all going after my wife. None of them are making carry-ons for me, right? So like as a male, what are my options? I can get like the one from Patagonia. It's a little like it's just way too granola-y. I can get the one from Toomey. That is what my dad would use. I can get the one from Rimowa that makes me look like a douchebag. So we just made. Sorry, no offense, Jason Panzer. He loves his Rimowa, but so we made a carry-on for our core customer, and that's. I love that Away is spending a ton of money on marketing. I love that Monos is spending a ton of money on marketing. It builds the category, right? And it lets us reach our core consumer for cheaper prices. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, and
it's
you know
silly to think you're ever.
Away
Go
normalized
ahead.
much higher prices, right? Like how much would you have if 10 years ago if you asked somebody how much would you pay for a carry-on, they would say a lower number than they would say today, right? Not just because of inflation, but because of people like Away entering the space and normalizing this. I don't know what Away's carry-on is, but it's several $100s. And so, like, again, having competitors spending money marketing and not just convincing people they want the more products in your category, but also pushing up that expectation of what they'd be willing to pay. These are all things that can be really helpful. So in an ideal world, you have good competitors. That's the tweet. In the ideal world, you have strong competitors, but you find a way to make an offering that's not the exact same as them, is differentiated, and there's room for a lot of people to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, carry-ons are a good example. Water bottles would be the best example. Is that there's several billion-dollar companies being built in a category that most people wouldn't think of, right? It's like, uh, yeah, it's awesome, man. So shout out Mike, having the right mindset. We're supposed to talk about my tweet, and I brought up you having a factory. I tweeted a quote tweet to somebody about the reason why there aren't more factories in America or more manufacturing being done in America is that there's no factories for hire, right? Mike, when you wanted to start making water bottles here, did you go on Alibaba and find a factory that could do it here, or did you have to go figure out how to do it yourself?
So this subject obviously is something I care a lot about. No, you didn't, because it doesn't exist. There's nobody that I knew one person that was making the type of product that we were looking to make, which at that point was plastic water bottles. I knew zero people. There are zero people in the United States making insulated stainless steel water bottles. I had the CEO of one of our big competitors tell me in person, gosh, if you guys could ever produce stainless steel water bottles, we would buy them from you. So there is no production of stainless steel water bottles in the United States. In fact, 98% of it happens in like a little, 20, 30 square mile area. It's really crazy. It's all in China. But we wanted to get into plastic water bottles to be able to make insulated stainless steel, to be able to gradually learn the different things we needed to learn. And immediately what you're just slapped with is exactly what you're saying, Sean. Like, there is no ecosystem. There's not really a robust contract manufacturing. There's not contract manufacturing to make the entire thing, but there's not even good contract manufacturing a lot of times for individual components. And I'll give you one simple example. We use silicone in our lids. And so we were like, okay, how do we want to do this? We looked at the price to injected silicone or rolled silicone or whatever, and it's really expensive. It's probably would be a couple $1,000,000. And we get all the way to the end of this, and we price it all out. We, even after, if you don't even include the prices of buying the machinery, if you just make the silicone, the input cost, the silicone cost alone, is more than you would pay for the finished product coming from China. And I don't know why that is, but some of it's due to the fact that they've got this insane ecosystem of 30 silicone suppliers that are, that you can go to and knock things out. And if you need a little valve, you can quote it out to 30 different people. Like, that doesn't exist at all in the United States. There's none of that. So it doesn't exist on the whole product level, and then it doesn't even exist on the component level. Usually there's like one or two people maybe that make what you need if you need something specific.
I have a couple data points to break that down. It's not like there's no manufacturing being done in the United States, but there's no contract manufacturing being done in the United States outside of food and outside of, like personal care. Those things have to be made in the United States because of FDA regulations. It's just way, way too hard and expensive to make those things abroad. So there is a robust contract manufacturing industry around food, supplements, that type of stuff. But like, random silicone parts, random whatever, right? Like we wanted to make wallets here. This started in like 2017. We wanted to make knives here. There was like 2 knife manufacturers who have contract space open. Benchmade makes it here themselves. A couple other companies make them here themselves. But there's a couple contractors open, and they're like, we can make you 500 knives in 2019. And that was literally in 2 years,
Wow.
they're going to give me allocation for 500. It's because they don't need our business. Like they have government contracts, they have everything else going on, and they know that the cost to spin up a new contract knife manufacturer, who the fuck would want to do that, right? Benchmade made it themselves so they could sell their own stuff. And that's, the number I have is 12% of the US GDP is manufacturing. So it's $2.3 trillion. In China, it's 27%. So let's see what China GDP is. It's, roughly the same amount of dollar value is being created in China as the United States. Our economy is 50% bigger. There's 27%. We're 12%. It's within a stone's throw. Maybe $4 trillion worth of goods are produced in China. So it's not that crazy. Like we still do a ton of manufacturing here, but a lot of it is Boeing making planes for themselves, or Ford making cars for themselves, or Benchmade making knives for themselves.
Military.
I can't go to Ford and be like, hey, will you make wallets for me? So it's this big fucking gap that there's still a bunch of stuff being made here, but it's being made for themselves, right? So if you ever want manufacturing to come back to America in spades, right, or in Mexico or whatever, you need this class of contract manufacturers for hire factories that I just don't know how we're going to get back, besides companies like me, companies like Mike, building factories, and then eventually those employees are going to quit and make their own factories. That's like the best way I could think of it. Mike, you got any ideas about that?
One of our friends was having a really hard time on Black Friday, and like some issue with email. I don't know the details of it, but it was an email issue. And the first thing that Sean said in response to that, and this is a testament to why you should consider SendLane and why they're a good sponsor, is just email Jimmy. And it's like, SendLane's not even this guy's provider, but the reputation that SendLane is building is that you're in the shit, they'll at least help you. Like that to me is such a mark of confidence in a SaaS platform. Like I've never seen that. Dude, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen somebody say like, you're on a competitor's product, go ahead and give that person a call. So shout out to Jimmy for building a killer brand.
Hell yeah. It's Jimmy's calling card on Twitter. He posts every Sunday that he's available to help, and Klaviyo closes support on Sunday. Do you know?
I just think it's like he's crushing it, man. So massive shout out to SendLane for the support on the pod.
We haven't switched over yet, but I have an email issue where our normal Gmail issue, it wasn't even about Klaviyo or anything. It was our normal Gmails were getting marked as spam. Jimmy joined our Slack and talked to our team and fixed the issue.
Just we've got to make it financially attractive to be in manufacturing. And I do think there's going to be some tailwinds there. I mean, one thing, it's funny, when we were first looking into manufacturing, one of the guys that we worked with, he was like, listen, guys, I can take you to some of these, you mentioned food. I can take you to some places where they're doing food packaging. And there's some guys that are not very smart, not nearly as smart as you guys, that are making a killing doing this. So I can tell anybody listening to this show that like, there is some real money in manufacturing. There is some real volume. There's some real opportunity for ambitious, smart people that are ready to get after it. But to your point, Sean, like what we need is an influx of capital, and we need incentives where people can really do well here. So for us, it's like, man, I don't know. Like I look at the world and I look at how much we're dependent on China. And, fortunately, she has come over and he's, looks like they want to play nice. And he's been on like a friendship tour in California, and that's great. But I always get nervous when so much of the goods that we use every day are dependent upon a relationship that seemed more politically shaky. And I just think it's probably bad for our companies and bad for our society if there's not more robustness to our supply chain. The amount of dependence on China is pretty crazy. The best advice I can give that I've learned is that we have, as we've gotten into the physical world, it's been messy, is what I would say. Year and a half in, it's been messy, and there have been some definite wins and there have been some definite losses. You've got to have a long-term mindset. You got to come ready to spend money, and you have to have multiple paths to victory where you can, there's a lot of different ways that you can make it work. And for us, that's how it's worked, is that we had an initial concept of how we were going to make this work, and it didn't work that way. But we had some other paths to victory, and other like ways that we were able to apply the manufacturing concepts and principles, and that's worked out for us. And it's going to end up being a pretty core piece of our business next year. But I wouldn't lie to anybody. Like, it'll be interesting to hear your experience, Sean. For us, I think it's like I've got to think about this as a 5 to 10 year project to really get the full, outcome and return.
Yeah. It makes you be more compassionate. Like, you have to run it differently. Like with my Chinese suppliers, I'm like, this is the price I'm paying, figure it out. Right. And they have to figure it out. It's like, or I'll move to somebody else. Right. Cause that is capitalism at work. It's like, if you want my dollars, you want my business, you're going to play by my rules. But I mean, we've only probably produced less than 100,000 wallets so far. I've owned the building for 4 months. Before that, we were using a different manufacturer. We ended up investing in it. It's like a whole thing. But the plan is to do 100,000 a month in 2024, right? Because like that's what the business needs to survive. Like our Chinese suppliers plus this extra, 1 million units in 2024. But I'm still going through tenant improvements on my building. It's like I bought the building and I'm still upgrading it. And it's always slower and more expensive. So we're still in the old building that I don't even own. It's a whole story. But
give us the reason why vertical integration you feel like is the right decision for Ridge. Because I always think that's helpful when we unpack for people, hey, here's why this is a win. Because, why not spend more time on product development or marketing or whatever else? Why for you has vertically integrating made sense?
So you can put them in a couple buckets, and you could debate which one of these buckets is the biggest. I'd probably put them into 4 buckets. The first is, I'll just get out of the way. There's a regulatory aspect. So we want to invest inside the U.S. economy. We want to invest in U.S. labor. We want to do all these type of things to show to the U.S. government that we are a serious U.S. company. So one of the quickest and easiest way to do that is to expand our manufacturing footprint. So we met with regulators and different people, and we're like, hey, we have a knockoff problem in China. How can we get better enforcement of our IP? They're like, show us that you're a domestic business. So we did that. So that's the first regulatory bucket. I've been open about that. We went through an ITC thing. That's, definitely the US government asked me to invest in the US economy, and I did it. The second bucket is private equity groups are very hesitant to invest in China-dependent businesses right now, because if you're just a Shopify account or an Amazon account and everything's done abroad, it's like, what are they buying, right? Like, what if China stopped shipping your thing? COVID was really, really scary. Like, there is political instability. Wall Street doesn't want China-dependent businesses right now. So that is the second bucket. The third bucket is companies should own what they do, right? Like I've said that forever. What's the most important thing about your business? You need to own that. For a long time, it was digital marketing. I was against agencies because what the fuck do you think you are? You are an Alibaba product. You got to get good at digital marketing. We already own digital marketing. The next piece of that is we just have to own our manufacturing. It's like, at the end of the day, we make stuff. We have to make stuff for a living. We need to know how that works and to be experts at it. So we're making a 5-year commitment to put tens of millions of dollars back into manufacturing, just so we know how to do it, right? Like we have to have that skill. And then the fourth bucket is there's a sales opportunity, right? Like, will people pay more for US made goods? I don't think so, but if they're the same prices they used to be and they're USA made, maybe it's a couple points in our favor. And then internationally, US made goods they're probably in more demand than inside the United States. I think US consumers might not care that much, but Chinese consumers really want shit made in America. So it's a perceived higher quality. So anyway, those are probably the 4 big buckets. Why are you doing it, Mike?
A subtle point I want. Well, there's a lot of similarities. There's a couple differences, but one of the points that you made that I really liked and is worth just underlining, that how can you design the best product possible if you don't know how it's made? And I don't think you can. Our ability to have a lot of agency in making the best products requires us to have an understanding of what's even possible in the physical world to make and what's impossible and what the constraints are. And for a lot of people, their product development is basically saying, just throwing ideas at China and saying, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? So even with our international manufacturing, I think we're getting better because we understand what's going on more. We understand the materials, we understand the processes, we understand the constraints. On at least 2 or 3 products, we have gone back to China on a product that we were working on and said, hey, wait a minute, what if we did it like this? And they've been like, yeah, that's actually a pretty good idea. We could do that. But we would have never had the understanding to be able to even make that suggestion if we weren't working with these things daily in the United States. So I think to answer your question, our list, first and foremost, I think, when you can create jobs domestically and create jobs in your community, that's what businesses are supposed to do. I mean, you said it. I'm kind of altruistic, but it's like, I do think part of the point of being a business owner is that you create opportunity for other people around you. And so, hey, if I can create opportunity for more people that live in my state, like I want to do that. Second of all, I'm worried about the political risk. Like there's a world where we can't trade with the place that 98% of our, insulated stainless steel bottles are made, and the other 2% might be made in India, and we've worked with them some, and they're much slower. And so in the, 1 in 10, 1 in 50 chance that happens, I need to be protected and I need to be prepared. Number 3, the more that we work in the physical world, the more that we find opportunities to be excellent and to create moats and strategic advantages. Like this is a simple example, but like getting into manufacturing is helping us to take on more responsibility when it comes to fulfillment and secondary manufacturing and warehousing and other activities that we had done none of. And so there's definitely efficiencies that we've unlocked there just by the simple fact that we're in manufacturing. A final piece that I don't know how long it takes us to unlock, but we're probably gonna unlock this in Q2 of next year, is that if you do manufacturing right, you can reduce how much of your capital structure has to be in inventory. And for a consumer brand, a lot of your capital is just sunk in inventory that just sits there and doesn't do anything. So if you can go from carrying 12 weeks, 14 weeks of inventory to carrying 10, because you can do some things on demand and you can do some things more just in time, you can free up at our scale millions of dollars that then can be put into, whether that's machines or investing in new products or marketing or whatever else. And so I think you can just run financially a much more successful company if you can do that. And obviously, like we were making all these decisions in the middle of 21, 22, when we were in inventory hell, where we were just impossibly deep on some things, and it was like, okay, don't like this, don't want to do this anymore. So those were some of our reasons that we got into it originally, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredibly accretive and additive to your business to own manufacturing. It's like, yeah, it's harder. You have to manage a staff, whatever. Like, but the just in time, the opportunities that come up, like it is super. There's a reason why a lot of giant companies do this, right? It's like, Why do car companies do it? It's because like it makes a better product or gives you more control or whatever. But it's really expensive. I mean, I'm only $2 million into it. Mike's probably into it more. But by the time I have like a fully functioning like production facility in Arizona, it could cost me $5 million. Like I'm already looking at buying the building next door because I'm worried. I'm like, yeah, there's not enough space. I can't make as much shit as I need here. So like, it is expensive to get going. Let's talk about why manufacturing went away quickly, because I have some thoughts.
Yep.
And you're seeing this in China right now. Contract manufacturing used to be in America. It's like, it's not like the Chinese fucking invented Chinese, like a contract manufacturing, but it is the first thing that gets hurt in economic cycles because you have no way to make money without a different business, right? Like someone needs to be placing orders with you. And as soon as other businesses start tightening your belts, right? Like you have no orders coming in, you have a big staff, you have machines sitting there. It's so easy for contract manufacturers to go into bankruptcy. And you're seeing that in China right now. We've had a little tiny ripple of people pulling back orders from China, and factories are already freaking out and shutting and trying to pivot and trying to find some way to do anything, right? It's because you have typically loans on your equipment, you have leases, you have salaries, and like it requires all of these things before you make a dollar. It's not like an agency business or even an e-com business. You have to have a lease, you have to have equipment, and you have to have people before you make your first dollar. So that's the reason why it's the first thing to go away in economic cycles. And it's the reason why everything in America is owned by companies, because I can control how much money I make because I'm a company. I sell things. If I need more, I just buy it. Right. So anyway, that's kind of why it went away. People talk about profit seeking. People talk about like, oh, it was cheaper to make it in China. Dude, that's been going on forever. I mean, people have always made certain things in certain places. And before China, it was Japan. Before Japan, it was Korea. It's always been these things. But you need a source of truth reporting hourly to accurately pivot budgets and campaign spend. And that one feature alone, my whole paid P&A team logs into it, my whole creative team logs into it, and they can see which ads are driving sales, creative, whatever, on an independent basis with real-time data, and then pivot budgets accordingly. So thank you, Northbeam, for being a sponsor. They also have a mixed media modeling tool, which this only applies for the big boys in chat. If you're spending $10 million a month, you need a mixed media modeling tool. And if I'm the first guy to tell you that, how the fuck did you get to $10 million a month and spend? Like, I'm too dumb for you to take advice from me. But that is the next level. Attribution tool first, then mixed media modeling, and Northbeam can carry you through that.
I just think that if you believe that the future, like let's just talk about technology for a second, whether or not you think we get to AGI, it is clear that the future is going to be much more machine driven and automation driven than today, right? And yeah, I mean, like I think if you look at Musk's thing that he's working on with robots that look like humans, or you watch those Boston Dynamics, things, the robots that look like they're going to come and take over the world. Clearly, that's where we're headed. If you go to China, you go to the factories, like they're automated. Like even in China, it's not about cost of labor anymore. It's not about hourly wages. Manufacturing is going to increasingly be a CapEx game, because all of the expense is going to be in getting these machines that can do, highly specific, highly automated work. So that's the trend. And the question is, how quickly are those type of machines going to come? Like how quickly is automation going to get to that level? And we'll see is the answer. But at the rate that artificial intelligence is progressing, you got to think it's sooner rather than later. And so in that world, it only makes sense that production is going to then gravitate either to one of two places. It's going to gravitate towards where the material inputs are coming from, or it's going to gravitate towards the point of sale locations, like where customers are actually getting the product. And my guess is that it's going to gravitate towards where customers buy products. That if there's a bunch of automated machines that are making my stuff, then I don't want to make that stuff in China. It's going to cost me the same amount to make it in China or Australia or Oklahoma City. I'm going to make it in Oklahoma City because from a supply chain perspective and a just-in-time perspective, that's what makes the most sense. The only thing that could cause that to be false is there are some dynamics with materials where, Chinese companies buy stainless steel, for example, at different prices than we do. And there are some things like that. There's some ways that there's some ways that I think it has been more advantageous to be in certain parts of the world than others when it comes to material costs. But who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But that's my bet. My bet is the automation gets better, the AI gets better, the machines get better, and things reposition back towards where the customers are that they're serving.
All right. Now, this is going to be a more political hot take for the second half of this episode, but Mike brought up steel being cheaper in China than the United States. So our products being made, we have to use built in the USA. We can't say made in the USA because it's called a qualifying statement.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why we can't is because there's one thing we can't do here, and it's anodizing of the product. And why can't we do it here? It's because the EPA won't let us. And if you're an EPA lawyer listening to this, feel free to email me. I would love to figure out a way to actually get this done here, bring more jobs to America. I'm sure you guys would love that. But it's a chemical process of treating the product, and they just don't want that to happen here. They're like, we don't want that. That's not good. And so steel prices being lower in China, it's because they have way lower regulation on those steel. Like, I bet the quality is different. I bet the CO2 emissions are way, way higher, and like they just don't care until they get a cheaper product in the market, helping fuel their rise of manufacturing. And Mike, is that correct? Is that what happened to steel?
Yeah, I'm going to get myself in trouble because I have a rule to try and not say more politically charged things. But here's one of the biggest problems that exists in our country today is that we will say, well, we don't want to anodize things because of CO2 emissions and that's bad for the environment. And then we'll turn around and be like, but it's fine for people to buy anodized things as long as that happens somewhere else. So it happens in China, where there's a lot less consideration for the environment. And then we're like, global warming, CO2 emissions, we got to get these down. And it's like, part of the reason we have a problem is because we just it's like we have a bunch of trash and we just throw it in our neighbor's yard. We throw it over the fence into our neighbor's yard and pretend it doesn't exist anymore. And so that kind of drives me crazy. And you see it all the time with the regulations that exist. I am all for good regulations that prevent us from doing things that harm the environment and about being conscientious and ethical with how you produce things. But when you just say, we're not going to do it at all over here, let India figure it out. They don't have the same incentive structures as us, and they are not going to be. Anyway, it's exactly what you said. There's a process, electrolysis, that we use with our bottles that's very similar where,
your iPhone is anodized. Like this fucking thing you carry around all day, this is anodization, and they won't let us do it here. And if you're at the EPA and you're listening and you're down to let me try, I will open a factory. Like, let's get this going. Like, the thing you can do here is Cerakoting, which is like a form of painting. Like, people do it on guns and weapons or whatever. But like, it's different than what we want to do. And so we can't fucking do it here. And so I have to use this qualifying statement, or I have to do it in Mexico where they'll let me do it. Right. It's those silly things. Mike, you're totally fucking right. If we think it's a problem and it affects the world, right, we should stop it.
You and I think, share the same view that the U.S. as a country, if it becomes a completely service, based industry service company, like that's what everybody's working like, you have a ton of vulnerability, especially if there's a period of global unrest where countries aren't playing nice with each other. And I think COVID was this wake-up call for everybody of like, hey, we might really have a situation where like the US isn't big enough and strong enough to keep everybody playing nice. And I think even that's the world we live in, right? Whether you're talking about the BRIC countries or, something else, like the world is not going to be this uniform thing where everybody gets along in the future. There's going to be multiple different kind of bases of power, and the Eastern view, the Middle Eastern view and worldview is very different than like the Western classical Judeo-Christian point of view. And then the Far Eastern view of the world is very different. And one of the more interesting things I ever read, it was basically about Chinese policy and how did Chinese policy get shaped over the years. And more or less what the thought process of the US government for a long time is that if we normalize relationship with China and we kind of bring them into our trading, that eventually they'll westernize and they'll adopt our way of thinking. And it's like, no, they actually didn't. They actually have a point of view, and it's pretty strong, and they're very proud of it. And they're not going to just adopt our way of thinking. And I think that's really just been in the last few years that's been obvious. In some ways, it shows our lack of respect for their worldview and their point of view to just assume, oh, of course they'll think like us if they trade with us for long enough. It's like, nope, that's not actually how it works.
Yeah, Mike. Okay, we covered a lot of ground. Let's talk about the China thing first. China's been around for 5,000 years, and they really care about China. When I talk to Chinese people, like, they really care about China, and like, there's a reason why they were isolationist for a lot of their history, right? They really care about, like, they find it disrespectful that like they don't own Taiwan. They're like, yeah, it's shameful for us as a country that we don't have that. We would love to get that back. Now, Xi just went on in California on the news being like, we don't want it. We swear we don't want it. But like, I think eventually like they will push towards a unified China. At the end of the day, I would like peace, prosperity, and fair trade across all these countries. And I want people to be as rich as possible. It makes my life easier selling them wallets the more money they have. So that's what I'm angling towards.
Well, here's the point that I would make, because I agree. Sean, and I think you and I both share, like, we're kind of global citizens. Like we appreciate a lot of different cultures. This isn't like hey, let's wrap ourselves in the flag and, sing God Bless America and how America's great at everything. But I do think this, undeniably, the world is more stable from a business perspective when the U.S. is strong. The strength of the U.S. has created, there's Pax Romana, there's been Pax Americana over the last however many years. And America being strong, America being capable is good for stability. It's good if China has a relationship with the US where they think those guys are capable. And if we did something if we went off the reservation, that they could easily replace the manufacturing we have. That's good. That's a check on maybe their worse impulses. And that's true with a lot of the different countries around the world, that like a strong America and a competent America is actually good for a stable world, which is what creates a good business condition, which for us as businessmen, this is why we care about it. Like, I mean, obviously we care about it as people. Like we want a stable world where people are treated well and treated fairly, but we also want it from a business perspective because trade depends on stability. I'm listening to one of the Koch brothers. He wrote a whole book. And one of the things he talks about is that if you trace out economic progress through civilization, like the stability and strength of the country matters a ton in terms of the economic growth and the productivity growth that you're able to recognize. And so a world, like I said, a world where America's strong, we've seen it over the last however many decades, and I think it'll continue to be true going forward, is a world where there's more business growth and there's more prosperity for everybody.
Well said, Mike. I listened to an interview with a CIA guy once, and it's very easy to point out the failures of American foreign policy, the Iraq War, assassination attempts or coups in Latin America, the Vietnam War. It's very easy to point out these failures. And basically his point of view was, you don't even see the successes. He's like, every time we've stopped a terrorist attack, you don't see that because it didn't happen. So it's super easy to be like, America's a bully, America's a bad guy, America killed all these people with these wars, but you don't actually see peace because it's inactive. And that really blew my mind, because I was like, yeah, why the fuck are we bombing places? Like, why are we doing all this stuff? But then his perspective is like, every person we take off the chessboard that would have done more harm, you never see or hear about. And like, that's kind of like, it's a hard argument. Just be like, I'm actually doing a bunch of stuff that you don't understand or see. But you have to think that like, oh, fuck, maybe there'd be way more 9/11s if America didn't have all these military bases. And like,
Well,
I never thought about that before.
Look at world history. Most of world history has been just nonstop tribalism and fighting and conflicts, right? Like, this is the exception, not the rule. The era that we're in right now, where peace has been more the rule than the exception. And there's a great podcast for anybody that's interested about any of this stuff. Hardcore History, I would highly recommend it. But Hardcore History has an episode that's about the atomic bomb, which is great. And one of the, he starts it by basically saying we're in the middle of an experiment, and if at any point we fail the experiment, the world ends. But so far, we've passed it every single day. We've woken up and we've passed it. But one of the little nuggets in there that I think it speaks to what you're talking about. The United States had nuclear weapons when no one else had them, and it didn't take over the world. It didn't impose its might and just spread out and say everything belongs to us. And if you go through all of the dominant empires that have existed, basically since the beginning of man, I don't think you can make an argument that a single one of those empires wouldn't have just said, all your bases belong to us. It's over. We're going to use these to take everything. You think Genghis Khan would have been like, would have hesitated to use nuclear weapons? Do you think the Roman Empire, do you think Alexander the Great, like none of these guys, anyway, so it's true that America has had a lot of shortcomings, but it's also true that there are some examples of things that they did that have transformed the way that the world looked. And one of them was the restraint, especially after the end of World War II, of saying we're not going to use nuclear weapons, even though we're the only person that has them.
Mike, it's a great point. I mean, I never thought about that, the only thing that stopped Alexander the Great was might. He came up to an army he couldn't beat. Like he would have kept going as far as he could. Genghis Khan would have kept going as far as he could. And it is pretty tight that we didn't be like, okay, everything's ours now. Some would argue that we did through culture and dollarization or whatever else, but at least we didn't drop any more nukes. But yeah, sick, man.
It's just always always easier. It's always easier to be a critic and to crap on things. And I just think we live in the most prosperous period in human history. And we have just it's just unbelievable the time that we get to live in. And so I'm more of an optimist. Like I look for all the as imperfect as things are, I see the silver linings. And I think that that's the perspective I'm trying to communicate, is that, it's why I'm such a huge fan of capitalism. It's like, have capitalists done bad things? Have they exploited people? Absolutely. Like I would never say that capitalism has been, a perfect process, but I would also say that series of incentives has taken the world, has absolutely transformed the world. It's transformed quality of life and expected living, ages and stuff like that for the globe. And so anyway, we're like way in the weeds from where we started. I don't even know where we started, but it's a good conversation.
All right, man. Well, you want to talk about any more e-com stuff?
Hey, no, I mean, I think that's a full episode, but I think that, I guess I'll end with this thought. If you're a business person, trade is a stabilizing influence on the world. It's a good influence on the world, and it raises the quality of life. And so like, that's one of the things that as business people, hopefully we do. Hopefully we're encouraging trade. We're encouraging understanding of people that have very different cultures. And as a result, the world's getting better. And maybe I'm trying to make what we do out to be more than it is. But I think everybody wants to draw a straight line from what do I do with my life and how does it make the world a little bit of a better place? And,
dude, yeah. I mean, getting to know other cultures is probably the best way to understand them and have a respect for them. It's why it's like food diplomacy. Like the reason why there's Thai restaurants in every city in America is because the Thai government's like, we got to get our name out there, and they just shipped a bunch of chefs all over the world. So it worked out. Dude, I love Thailand now.
Are you serious? I did not know that.
Yeah. It was the tourism board made a bunch of people move all over the world to open Thai restaurants. They have like formal training. It's like, and it's to get tourism up. And they started that in the 80s and it totally worked. And that's why you can go to any city in Oklahoma and get pad Thai.
Man, that is brilliant. I'd never heard that before.
All right, dude, we'll end it there. Let's do a little thank you to Send Lane, Northbeam, Fulfill. Thank you guys for listening. I swear we'll go back to e-commerce next week. We'll have all the boys here. Thank you for being here, Mike. Appreciate your time. Let the credits roll.